All right, so back at the Stoneworks and did a little bit more on the cutting front today, but I just thought I would capture this while we still have some snow. And this is all pretty much exposed currently, and these are the videos I've posted primarily from there that have seen the most Instagram. And these large chunks here are all a slab of stone under here, so you can kind of see the magnitude of it. Not so much now with the snow down, but it basically follows that line right down here, and as I've talked about in other videos, is extremely statistically improbable that you would have this much stonework aligned to the eastern solstice sunrise, the western solstice sunrise, the summer solstice sunset, summer solstice sunrise, and then the equinox, as we just saw this recently, sets due west across the Bolton Range there, over there, right? So basically west from here, and that was one of the first pieces that I figured out there were some alignments, was right here. I've done a video on this one. I just kind of sat in this like western facing, it was like an equinox stone is what I called it, and it was just a stone sitting up here. So I don't actually think it was by design of some former thing. I just had it balancing right there facing due west because it was fun. And this is kind of just another little bit that I found, and you can see all kinds of things that over years I just thought was just natural coursing and things breaking and whatnot. So I never put a lot of thought to it as to why this much stonework is literally right here forming these things. And then of course, as we dug it up, you could see all of the tetrahedral carving or placements and building of features that hold water at significant volume, and of course all the other videos that I've done that map this stuff out. So, and as opposed to what I used to think, I was like, well, why isn't it just, farmer field stone? But because it's actually all connected in a larger ledge framework that I then thought was, well, maybe it's just, natural. But increasingly, it's really hard to look at it as just natural, especially as I am now cutting in this section. So again, big boulder under here that you can't see, another stone here, and it just wraps right around here on the southern mound. So this is where we're opening up next, and you can see it just follows this line right here, right? And then up here, there's more stonework, all of it really pointing out to this summer solstice in a massive way. So I've identified previously on that side of the mound how it points out to the winter solstice sunset. But when you start looking at all of these stoneworks here, they really just have this pronounced trajectory. And then there's also what I've talked about as concentric circles, or spirals even, that when you look at these stones, there's almost like this terracing going on. I used to build trails out here. Like this was one of the trails where when I was teaching my kids how to do technical mountain biking, it's a pretty narrow on the ledge. If you fall, you're there, but it's not too much for a kid to learn on. But, these are the things that as I started looking at how these are all positioned, they all kind of do these spiraling tiers and terraces up to there. Right, so around here I followed it, there's that one, there's that one. Now these up in here have not moved right there. So pretty much everything in there is original. These here were recently dug up. So these couple here and up here are down in here. As we were making our road to the north, as we have all permitted and planned and built and curb cuts, things happening, we had to do this. And so now it's shifting a bit, where we are more than likely going to use all of the stoneworks exposed as a way to effectively tell the story of what's above and below and the astronomy of the place. So yeah, it's just a lot of work to get these trees dropped. And you know, this is like another little terracey thing here. So you know, due north is like right in this little rock cluster here, and then south, right? But like when you get to the North Mound, if you follow that same trajectory, it hits a huge glacial erratic on the exact spot where this is, where I theorize it was at, was maybe back, tilted up or something like in here area. There's that mound there. I always thought it was just a dump of dirt, but it kind of has these symmetry points around here. I don't think it's anything, but there's also another one down near my neighbor's property, and that kind of follows another line all the way through the Worcesters here along this road. And I always just thought it was coincidental, but there's that. So this is going to get opened, and you can start to see already. I'll go to the big rocks, like there's another one, huge rock under here. All of it is quartz inclusive in the basalt, the schist, and the sliding into stumps here. So essentially, these stoneworks here kind of all ring these massive pieces right there, and that's just right up to that stonework there and out there. So we're going to try to figure out how it all goes together right here. Again, this is all going to get exposed. The LiDAR right here shows a perfect square, or rectangle rather, back behind this tree. And that tree's got to be 40 years old maybe. It's got to be older than that. I've been here 36 years. That was, so I think it's like 55 years, 60 or something like that. I don't know. I could count the rings off of this one here. But the reason I just cut that one is it's sitting on top of this really large stoneworks here. That's all, I think, going to connect up to where we're just at up there. And so I want to free up what I'd call the apex of it. So the high point of all the contiguous stoneworks are now effectively free of, well, no, there's a bunch of trees left to cut. And so if anybody wants to help support the effort here, and definitely choose up gas and blades. But once we get through here, the theory now is that we're going to see from these stoneworks a drop. Let me get down here to where I did some exploratory digging before we ran out of time at the end of last season. So these are all stoneworks here. And then I think it comes under here, because we have something right over here. You see the top of that one stone right in the center now. That's a fairly large, massive piece. And then there's a couple out here. And they all just are doing the same symmetry of step down terracing, if you will. And then it picks up over there and goes up to the North Mound. in the inverse pattern of that, which is not a normal phenomena that you would find. And then actually, yeah, you can see right now, that is the boulder across at the quarry. And you can kind of see when I was doing another video, I was showcasing how the previous quarrymen that were working this quarry had pulled stuff out for I-89 between, I believe it was Montpelier and Bolton is the official story. But these are the stoneworks on the northeast side of this mound. As they could see, there's all the boulders. So I've done a piece on how this points up to the summer solstice sunrise as it hits up to there, to that center point, where soon you'll be able to see all these massive amounts of stoneworks. Whereas like in here, there is not the same level of distributed boulders and stoneworks. And so that's actually why, you know, I was planning on the driveway coming right through here. And we already have our curb cut. And that was mostly because I'd be entering and exiting at the top of the hill, and cars from the hiking trail would be flying by. And so I don't want to be on there anymore. But that was kind of why we stopped. But we'll probably end up just putting like a large screen all the way across here, and mostly so that when we're out there, we're going to be able to look backwards and see star patterns coming up over the leading up into the sky, the night sky. But yeah, you can see there's that equinox rise point, and like this whole hill here, I think, you know, it's one of those things where you could just watch the moon come up and the sun come up and all of the stars, and it basically is a timepiece that all of those 18.6 year cycle lunar rises are mapped out that way and go from the north to the south across the Worcesters from here. And so that represents the maximus of the the lunar cycle, and then obviously the solar cycle, as these stones point to for the settings, and the equinox in the middle. So yeah, that's kind of the crux of it, you know. Whether the quarrymen left those stones there or they were there previously, I don't know, but they definitely have some holes carved into them that are not the diameter of the 1950s holes. And that was the other thing I was gonna show up near the sugar house. We have a stone that has a hole cut into it, and it also doesn't reflect 1950s and 1960s quarrying diameter bits. And so ultimately, that isn't necessarily, I'm saying, is part of some previous culture, but it is also something that is evidenced in other megalithic sites, where you would see essentially the hole itself, but in some cases there's a star pattern. Other cases there's like a multi-pointed star. But here there's another piece of stone, and so basically out here there's a bunch of slabs underneath the snow. I can't really get a good view of them, but they're just super flat slabs, and could very well be all the way across here, going out there. As far as the digs that we've done and the probes, it seems to suggest. And so that hill, and now we're looking at here, between this high point, the apex on the stoneworks, and here, we're thinking that's where we're gonna dig in here and pull this tree down because we just have a ton of stones that are part of this setup here that actually are raising a lot of questions. So let me just bring it over here. Let's see if we can get to, there's the hole. That might be stuck under some snow that I can't quite get to. Oh, there it is. So that is a hole that has snow in it now, but that goes all the way through. And this is broken, but it does form a perfect circle all the way through. And you can see light on the other side in summer when there's no snow on the way. Let's see if I can get in there from here. I forget where it comes through. I think it's down in here somewhere. Where am I? Oh, we're over here. Yeah, someone's coming through there. I don't know if I can get light in there. And you can kind of see the light popping through. I don't know if I'm going to get that there, but oops. No, that's the. All right, well, I don't know if I got it. But in summer, you could definitely see through. So in this one, these two pieces here are almost perfectly flat to each other, which is kind of interesting. But if I had to theorize, they were probably once standing erect. And this is like a headpiece to, let's see, I'm flipping this camera around a bunch. So like this would have been like that if you follow the camera orientation as like a, that's sort of what I was thinking it would have been. But it could have been sitting up on here as some form of working device, maybe. But now it's here. So, you know, why is there a drilled hole right there? That has always been my question. And then, you know, we have this stuff here where it's kind of a cool little pyramid stone right there. But the reality is we have where like the stone wall is here and west is definitely facing in this direction. So it holds the compass point. But then as you can see here, there's like a trough that goes around there. And that trough is consistent as far as the, you know, you can see there's a depth down here. So if we think about that depth there as potentially a base point similar to out here, I'm going to come back right here and you can start to see the height of that is not atypical to how some might have stone chambers. So that's why we're going to drop these. And then we're going to, essentially, when we figure this one out, the screen itself is here. And it will be as tall as these trees with the intent to effectively screen all of the celestial rise and set events or rise events rather. And then the set events we'll just have here as part of the show, if you will, sermon, whatever you want to call it. But it's allowed in the way of like, how do I put it? not so much academic freedom, but like the idea of actually taking these stoneworks and then being able to model not just rise and set events like out back here, but then actually be able to replicate the stoneworks with, well, not just polyhedral, but like vector-based CAD work that then simulates not just what this is now, once everything is pulled up and you can see all stone, but also what it would have been like across time when you had water at Paleolithic shorelines right over there. So, you know, these are the kinds of things where now it's like we could really actually recreate how this place was settled, who lived here, why next door in the southern field over there. You can see that white hump there up in the field between the ravines here. Like that has its own little chamber into a space where you have wells that pump out 600 psi across 3 heads. So, you know, the reality of the amount of LiDAR that we've discovered, and as far as how the actual water has been engineered for long past the Holocene, going backwards, is massive. And so you understand then this bowl, this parameter of literally constraint. That constraint is what holds all of the water in this space when you have Paleolithic glacial meltwater and it's all releasing relative to quartz and piezoelectrics, as we've done in our research and done all of the documentation on. You can get more information at the GitHub, but this is literally like why this place wouldn't have had ice from a glacial reality. And that is fundamentally why these stoneworks are here. Isn't that fun? All right, well, so if anybody wants to help out with either just literally coming and helping me cut trees or send me some cash and I'll buy some gas and do some more cutting, it's all out of pocket. So that's why the kinship is something where you can help make a difference. And I'm grateful to all of you that have continued to support me. Even as we know like very little about things, we also start to know more and more. And that's the beauty of like what we're investigating here. So it's really unbiased. It is 100% using that CHI-R OS framework that we've created and now published in an open source framework that anybody can use and ultimately train their own AI on and do things that actually can be tested. We don't say it's true unless you can actually grind it out and do the calculations and actually prove it's true. There is no narrative bias. We do not need to prove other cultures or other religions for us to find the certainty of what actually is true. And that means the Earth does forcing of orbits and kinds of physics that follow, and solar insolation on glaciers and all of it. So, you know, there's a bunch of videos coming on that stuff. And if you find value, you know, I appreciate it, and throw me some cash so that we can get this done, because it is a lot of money just to cut these trees, which isn't like the beginning of the work. And that's something that I'm going to really look to you all to say, well, this is as much as we can do. And if you want to throw some more my way, we'll do some more and we'll expose some more. And all of it is because we have a delinquent state government that doesn't want to send a state archaeologist to the site. So now he's sort of surrendered the authority on Paleolithic Vermont to me, and I'm flying blind, except I'm now not blind. I'm the expert on this in the state of Vermont. And it's this weird space where authorities hate being challenged, but then if they don't show up, they don't deserve to get the accolades that they sometimes really think they deserve, right? So there's another stone that was dug up right in there. We've done probe testing on this site, and it pretty much follows this pattern that has almost like a chamber coming in here, right into that space. So meaning this stone, when you probe on this side, has a high point right there, and then a high point right here. So it has almost like a tail of a snake or a fish that you could, like a stone, that you could literally just have this earth in between. But since there's no, stone on the probe test till you get here, it might be that that's the entrance into this space here, or not. I mean, we don't know yet. I haven't really surfaced underneath this, but I guess that would be this year. Originally we were thinking take these 3 trees that form a perfect equilateral triangle, and we were thinking about putting the screen across there in 3 directions, and then that way we would do an art piece that way. But I think the conical nature of this is definitely much more in line with the Worcester Mountains than just doing it here in a one spot. Anyway, that's all stuff to come. We have a lot more to dig up. And as you can see here, I did the summer solstice sunrise rocks. Summer solstice sunset rocks are just over there when I'm clearing up. And this is the winter solstice set and the cluster here. So if you look at this entirety of this mound and you run the calculations of where would you find all of the large stones, they would not necessarily at this scale be pointing in direct things to these points of actual reality in a range that would span the actual reality over millennia, the long cycle of timekeeping on Earth. So it's not just like, oh, this is the year 1972 or something, but like actually like all the range of Earth's orbital mechanics. But, statistically, that's why it's so not random.